Hi, I'm Anthony. Welcome back to channel with new story of nondescript house on Charlotte Street in Kansas City, Missouri, transformed into a chamber of horrors, each harrowing ordeal meticulously chronicled through a chilling array of photographs and notes. The Kansas City butcher, perpetrator of one of the most ghastly series of crimes in American history, led what appeared to be an ordinary existence, managing to evade suspicion for years. Robert Barella, the proprietor of an antique shop at a local flea market, crossed paths with another vendor, Paul Howell, whose booth neighbored his. Barella also became acquainted with Howell's younger son, Jerry. Initially, Jerry and his companions taunted Barella for his openly gay identity. However, Barella later asserted that Jerry confessed to engaging in sex work to earn money. Despite this rocky start, Barella fostered a seemingly amicable rapport with the Howell family, occasionally assisting Jerry with minor legal predicaments. By 1984, Jerry had reached the age of 19. On July 5th of that year, Barella committed his first documented murder by killing Jerry Howell. After offering him a ride to a dance contest, Barella reportedly incapacitated Howell with alcohol and an assortment of tranquilizers inside his vehicle. Upon returning to his residence, Barella further sedated Howell until he lapsed into unconsciousness. Subsequently, Barella injected Jerry with a potent tranquilizer, binding him and subjecting him to a relentless onslaught of abuse, torture, and sexual assault over a span of 28 hours. Howell, in his anguish, pleaded with Barella for mercy and questioned why he was being subjected to such cruelty. Barella claimed that Howell perished from asphyxiation due to a gag and the drugs, professing that he had not anticipated such an outcome. He purportedly attempted CPR before relocating the body to the basement and disposing of it in garbage bags for collection. Despite inquiries from law enforcement concerning Howell's disappearance, Barella adamantly maintained that he had no knowledge of his whereabouts. After luring him to his home, Barella meticulously documented the tortures he inflicted on Howell and all subsequent victims, callously ignoring their pleas for mercy and instead taunting or threatening them. Later, he insisted to investigators that his actions were not driven by pleasure, but by a twisted desire for physical and mental satisfaction. On April 10, 1985, Robert Sheldon, a 20-year-old who had previously stayed with Barella, sought temporary shelter. Despite Sheldon's timely rent payments and lack of physical attraction to Barella, the latter chose to incapacitate and confine Sheldon after finding him intoxicated. Barella claimed his actions stemmed not from specific animosity towards Sheldon, but rather from an outlet for his anger and frustration towards others. Over 3 days, Sheldon endured various tortures in a second-floor bedroom. When a worker arrived on April 15 to fix the roof, Barella killed Sheldon by suffocation, preparing to dispose of his body in the upstairs bathroom. The residents of Charlotte Street remained oblivious to the horrors unfolding behind Bardella's closed doors. In June, Barella encountered Mark Wallace, who had sought refuge from a storm in his tool shed. Observing Wallace's distressed state, Barella offered him tranquilizers, claiming they would help him relax. After accepting, Wallace became Bardella's next captive, enduring torture for nearly a day until his death from drug effects, gagging, and oxygen deprivation. Bardella's selection of young men didn't initially appear overtly sinister. These individuals, often estranged from their families or struggling, were drawn to Bardella's apparent kindness. He exploited their vulnerabilities, offering work, shelter, or a listening ear to fulfill his depraved desires. Each victim, seeking connection or support, found themselves ensnared in a nightmare from which there was no escape. On September 26, 1985, Barella agreed to let James Ferris, an acquaintance, stay temporarily. Planning to abduct Ferris, he arranged to meet him at a bar that night. Despite his brutal treatment of previous victims, Barella claimed Ferris was the first person he intentionally tortured. After drugging Ferris and subjecting him to continuous torture and sexual assault for 27 hours, Ferris's condition deteriorated, leading to his death. Berdella cryptically logged Ferris' demise as 86, a term from his chef career meaning anything from throw it out to stop the project. The meticulous documentation of his crimes suggests a chilling level of premeditation and detachment, along with a pathological need for control. Berdella didn't merely seek to dominate his victims physically. He aimed to immortalize his power over them. Stoops, a drug user and occasional sex worker, had stayed at Berdella's home with his wife in 1984 before losing touch. Their paths crossed again at Kansas City's Liberty Memorial Park on June 17, 1986, where Berdella enticed Stoops with promises of food and potential sex, knowing Stoops needed money for drugs. Berdella, greatly attracted to Stoops, held him captive for 2 weeks, attempting to mold him into a compliant sex slave through torture. Despite Stoops' requests for food, Berdella callously refused, causing Stoops to break down in tears. After several failed attempts to feed him, Stoops' condition worsened due to severe internal injuries inflicted by Berdella, eventually leading to his death from septic shock in the spring of 1987. In his shop in the spring of 1987, Berdella befriended Larry Wayne Pearson, a 20-year-old who expressed an interest in witchcraft and wizardry. After bailing Pearson out of jail and realizing his disinterest in employment, Berdella decided to capture him. Following a conversation about robbing gay men inspired by watching Creep Show 2, Berdella drugged Pearson after sharing a meal, then tortured him in the basement. Despite Berdella's claim that Pearson was the most cooperative of his victims, Pearson endured 6 weeks of captivity and abuse before finally expressing defiance by biting Berdella. In response, Berdella fatally bludgeoned and suffocated Pearson before burying his body in the backyard. During a drunken ride home from a bar, Berdella boasted about abducting and torturing young men, but his claims were dismissed due to his inebriated state and the seeming impossibility of such acts in Kansas City, known for its friendly and trusting atmosphere. However, the tranquility of the city was shattered on the day before Easter 1988 when Berdella kidnapped Christopher Bryson, a 22-year-old male sex worker, offering him money for sexual services. Bryson was rendered unconscious by a blow to the back of his head with an iron bar, then injected with drugs and tied to Berdella's bed, where he endured a series of abuses and tortures similar to Berdella's previous victims. Despite Berdella expressing a level of trust in Bryson, he made it clear that there would be no compromise on his sexual abuse, leaving Bryson trapped in a house of horrors. Many individuals who preceded us are now deceased due to errors they committed within a span of merely 3 days while held captive. Bryson, through his ingenuity, succeeded in gaining a measure of Berdella's trust, persuading him to modify the manner in which he was restrained. Arguing that the circulation to his arms was being compromised by being bound above his head, Bryson convinced Berdella to instead tie his hands in front of him. Subsequently, he also persuaded Berdella to leave a television on with the remote control within reach when he was absent from the room. Throughout this ordeal, Bryson fervently contemplated escape. His opportunity arose on the following day when Berdella departed for work, inadvertently leaving a matchbook within Bryson's reach. Utilizing this small item, Bryson burned through his restraints, clad only in a dog collar. His daring escape involved leaping from a second-floor window, resulting in a fractured foot. Upon spotting a meter reader nearby, Bryson urgently sought assistance, imploring them to summon the police. Although the residents of a nearby home denied him entry, they notified the authorities, leading to Bryson's encounter with 4 police officers. Initially recounting his ordeal as a kidnapping while hitchhiking, Bryson detailed how Berdella had subjected him to captivity, restraining him to a bed where he endured repeated sexual assaults. The officers observed Bryson's distressed state, evident through his injuries, including the dog collar, injured foot, swollen eyes, and the multitude of scars and welts covering his body. As Bryson received medical attention at Menorah Medical Center, officers coordinated with the Kansas City Police Department to secure a search warrant for Berdella's residence. Subsequent interviews at the police department unveiled Bryson's revelation regarding Polaroid photos depicting deceased individuals, along with Berdella's ominous warnings. Berdella's apprehension on charges related to Christopher Bryson's sexual assault occurred on the same day. Missouri law mandated a 20-hour window for detectives to substantiate their detention and formulate charges, transforming the Easter weekend into a frenzied period of investigation. Despite Berdella's outward appearance as an eccentric yet amiable individual, his residence harbored horrors beyond imagination. The scene inside his home, resembling a grotesque museum of cruelty, validated Bryson's harrowing account of his captivity, with investigators uncovering evidence of restraint and torture, including burnt ropes, an electrical transformer, syringes, prescription drugs, and an array of implements designed for torment. The discovery of a chainsaw, hacksaw, and miter saw among Berdella's possessions further validated the harrowing experiences of restrained individuals, hinting at the gruesome activities that transpired within his abode. Perhaps most disturbingly, investigators unearthed a trove of 334 Polaroid pictures and 34 snapshot prints depicting Bryson and other men, capturing moments ranging from their daily lives to scenes of torture and death. Berdella's residence also harbored disturbing literary materials and a stenographer pad meticulously documenting the torment inflicted upon each victim. Each photograph, each note, served as a chilling narrative of unfathomable suffering and despair, providing a glimpse into the depraved mind of a man who viewed others not as human beings, but as mere objects for his sadistic gratification. Additionally, newspaper clippings pertaining to a missing individual named Jerry Howell, along with a wallet and driver's license belonging to another missing person, James Ferris, were discovered in a closet on the second floor. These findings underscored the breadth of Berdella's heinous crimes. The Kansas City Police Department assembled a dedicated task force comprising 11 detectives and a sergeant solely focused on the Berdella investigation. Their exhaustive efforts delved into Berdella's past, revealing his notoriety among local male sex workers for targeting vulnerable young men. Despite Berdella's vehement denials and the absence of concrete evidence directly linking him to the disappearances, his status as a prime suspect prompted surveillance and questioning, which he resisted adamantly. The identification of James Ferris, through photos found in Berdella's possession, as well as Paul Howell's recognition of his son in one of Berdella's photographs, further corroborated suspicions. Efforts were undertaken to identify other individuals depicted in the photographs, with detectives meticulously comparing new images of Berdella to those in the Polaroids to establish matches. Freddie Kellogg, a former lodger, provided invaluable insight into Berdella's methods of manipulation and abuse, including drugging his lodgers before engaging in non-consensual sexual acts and coercing others to bring young men to his home under false pretenses. Kellogg's testimony shed light on Berdella's tactics of intimidation and blackmail, which instilled fear and reluctance among potential informants. Despite Berdella's initial silence during formal questioning, mounting evidence eventually led to his indictment on multiple charges, including felonious restraint, assault, and forcible sodomy. Dental X-rays confirmed the identity of one victim, Robert Sheldon, whose skull was discovered in Berdella's possession. Tips from the public, along with dental records, facilitated the identification of additional victims, culminating in Berdella's indictment on murder charges. Facing the prospect of the death penalty, Berdella opted to accept a plea deal, confessing in detail to the crimes perpetrated against his victims. This confession resulted in a guilty plea to 1 count of first-degree murder and 4 counts of second-degree murder, in addition to his previous life sentences without parole for other offenses. Berdella's detailed confessions provided closure to the families of his victims, ensuring that he would never again walk free to inflict harm upon others. Within the Polaroid images, Berdella claimed that only 6 of the individuals depicted were either unconscious or deceased. His confessions provided a disturbing glimpse into the dark labyrinth of his mind, prompting questions about the factors that led him down a path of such extreme violence. Robert Berdella Jr. was born on January 31, 1949, in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, a quiet suburb of Cleveland. He came into a seemingly typical American family of the post-war era, being the elder of two children born to Robert Andrew Burdella Sr., a die setter at Ford Motor Company, and Mary Louise Burdella. His father, a devout Roman Catholic of Italian descent, and his mother, of German and British descent, were regular attendees of Mass, instilling religious values in their children. From a young age, Burdella faced challenges, including a speech impediment, severe nearsightedness requiring thick glasses, and high blood pressure necessitating medication. He struggled with feelings of alienation and inadequacy, often retreating into solitary hobbies like collecting coins and stamps to find solace. Bullied for his lack of athleticism and high-pitched voice, Burdella endured a difficult adolescence marked by a strained relationship with his domineering father, who occasionally subjected him and his brother to physical and emotional abuse. Despite excelling academically and showing interest in art, history, and cooking, Burdella's sense of isolation persisted. During his formative years, Burdella discovered his homosexuality, a realization that deepened his feelings of alienation in the conservative Midwestern environment of his youth. He struggled to reconcile his sexual identity with societal expectations, keeping it secret for several years. This internal conflict likely fueled his growing resentment towards mainstream society, especially as he exhibited aggressive behaviors, particularly towards women, during his mid-teens. The loss of his father to a fatal heart attack at the age of 39 on Christmas Day in 1965 further propelled Burdella into seeking solace in his Catholic faith, though he later grew disillusioned with religious beliefs. He immersed himself in the study of various religions and occult groups, including Satanism, finding influence in movies like The Collector, which depicted themes of kidnapping and captivity. These formative experiences, coupled with Burdella's struggles with his identity and his disillusionment with societal norms and religion, likely contributed to the development of his disturbing inclinations towards violence and control. As Burdella navigated through his tumultuous adolescence and early adulthood, his inner turmoil and feelings of alienation continued to intensify. Despite his academic achievements and burgeoning interests, he found it increasingly challenging to reconcile his true self with the expectations imposed by his family and society at large. The discovery of his homosexuality in a conservative Midwestern environment added another layer of complexity to his already fraught existence. Fearing rejection and ostracization, Burdella concealed this aspect of his identity, grappling with profound internal conflict and a growing sense of isolation. His brief relationship with a girl in his early teens served as a facade, masking the inner turmoil he experienced as he struggled to come to terms with his sexuality. The pressure to conform to societal norms exacerbated his feelings of inadequacy and detachment, driving him further into a world of solitude and introspection. Burdella's aggression towards women and disdain for mainstream society underscored his deep-seated resentment towards those who represented the societal ideals he felt compelled to adhere to but ultimately could not reconcile with his true self. These feelings of frustration and disillusionment simmered beneath the surface, festering as he grappled with his identity and his place in the world. The loss of his father at a relatively young age plunged Burdella into a period of profound introspection and spiritual exploration. Seeking solace in his Catholic faith initially, he soon found himself disillusioned with organized religion, turning instead to the study of various belief systems and occult practices. Films like The Collector served as catalysts for Burdella's descent into darker realms of thought, providing disturbing yet captivating narratives that resonated with his own inner turmoil and desires. The themes of control, captivity, and obsession depicted in such movies mirrored Burdella's own psychological landscape, offering a twisted sense of validation for his burgeoning inclinations towards dominance and power. As Burdella embarked on his journey of self-discovery, his fascination with the macabre and the taboo intensified, fueling a growing obsession with exerting control over others and exploring the depths of human psychology. With each passing year, His descent into darkness seemed inexorable, laying the groundwork for the horrors that would eventually unfold within the confines of his own home. Berdella's mother hastily remarried, a decision that Berdella resented deeply, feeling it was a betrayal of his late father. This resentment drove him to become increasingly reclusive, immersing himself in solitary hobbies such as painting, coin and stamp collecting, and corresponding with pen pals from various countries. These pen pal relationships, often exchanging stamps, photos, and stories of mythical figures, historical icons, and architectural wonders, fueled his passion for primitive art and antiques. Eventually, this passion led him to establish his own antiques business in 1982. After graduating high school, Berdella left Ohio for Kansas City, where he enrolled at the Kansas City Art Institute. It was here, in this new environment, that Berdella began to explore his identity more freely. However, this period of self-discovery was overshadowed by troubling behavior. Initially, Berdella excelled as a diligent and talented student, but as time passed, he fell into a group of peers engaged in drug use, eventually leading him to sell drugs for profit and abuse alcohol himself. Reports from this time revealed disturbing incidents, including allegations of animal torture as part of a college art project, indicating a concerning fascination with control and suffering. Berdella's tenure at the Art Institute abruptly ended after his arrest for drug possession. Following this, he embarked on a path increasingly shrouded in darkness, focusing more on manipulation and control. He withdrew from the college following criticism over a disturbing incident involving the killing and cooking of a duck. Settling in Kansas City, Berdella openly embraced his homosexuality and formed connections with individuals from marginalized backgrounds, offering support to those struggling with addiction and criminality. Despite presenting himself as a helpful figure in the community, Berdella's true nature began to surface. He engaged in sexual relationships with some of the men he supported, exerting control over them through financial assistance and inviting them to live with him. While maintaining a facade of civic-mindedness, Berdella's personal life became increasingly complex, marked by financial struggles and occasional theft to supplement his income. Berdella's descent into darkness became clearer through psychiatric evaluations, which revealed his enjoyment of dominance and control. He viewed himself as superior, envisioning his victims as mere objects for his gratification. This dehumanization allowed him to rationalize his actions, ultimately leading to the horrifying crimes for which he would later become infamous. Viewed as inferior by Berdella, a successful businessman, this mindset facilitated his cruel acts of torture, where he sought to control every aspect of his victims' experiences, depriving them of all emotions and sensations unless administered by him. He described his murders as some of my darkest fantasies becoming my reality, mentioning how the film, The Collector, which he first saw in 1965, deeply influenced him. Particularly after his initial shock and disgust following his first murder, this film became a motivating psychological force for his subsequent actions against his victims, whom he perceived as having lost all humanity once he had rendered them captive. Berdella denied allegations of involvement in Satanism, confessing instead to capturing his victims after unsuccessfully attempting to steer them away from their general lifestyles. Frustrated by the failure of his efforts, he said he captured them first, and the rest developed. Berdella had a depressive personality disorder and was diagnosed as a sexual sadist. Despite his detailed confession, the remains of his 6 victims, disposed of in trash bags, were never found. Incarcerated at the Missouri State Penitentiary, Berdella attempted to rehabilitate his image through interviews and correspondence, portraying himself